Hello, everyone out there in podcast world. Hope you're having a great day. You're listening to or watching Service Business Mastery Podcast. I'm here sitting virtually next to my co-host, Joshua Crouch. I'm super excited about today's show. We're going to talk about the X factor, how you stand out with your business. We're talking with Pete Ramsey. He's an Army vet, and huge shout out to Pete for that, and thank you for your service. Then he left there, became a technician, and then started a business, sold it, then went to work for Linux for a while, and is now in the coaching side of things. And so I'm super excited to talk about HVAC X Factor and really how you can stand out in a crowd. Everybody that knows me has listened to the show for a while, especially if you're anywhere around Savannah. Jesse Cole and the whole team over at Savannah Bananas, and the whole concept there with the bananas and the Find Your Yellow Tux. If you're watching this video, you can see behind me, his book is actually sitting right there behind me on the shelf, the yellow book, Find Your Yellow Tux. So how you stand out. And so like, that's kind of what I've always kind of taken to heart. It's the reason why I wear a 3-piece suit out in public, and
that's your yellow tux.
That's my yellow tux with a ball cap. And so
I think you should just do an orange tux.
I actually have one, but the problem is I look like Dumb and Dumber whenever I'm wearing it. So it's like, yeah, it definitely, it's an awkward one, because the one that I actually found has these like huge lapels on it, and I'm like, yeah, this is not gonna work.
Yeah, I don't think they make orange suits in bulk, so you gotta like special order. You gotta find some off the wall store that has something like that.
Exactly. Yeah, but yeah, I'm super excited to have Pete on, and I know that you've spoke with Pete a good bit in the past, so you have a little bit more of a relationship. So I'm going to definitely dive into the fact that I'm ignorant in this situation, in this conversation. So I love those words, because
is that different than any other episode?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. That's most every of the episodes, which are great because I can really. I'm not the type of person that I'm afraid of looking dumb or sounding dumb. So I'll ask the craziest questions in the world. So
no. Pete, what he focuses on is, a lot of times businesses, especially contractors, are great at what they do. That's why they started their business. They're great tech, they're great at sales, they're great at something, but they don't know how to let the rest of the world and their customers know that. So that way people remember you and they have a certain emotional feeling about your business, because we all know at this point, people buy totally irrational reasons. They buy because they feel something. And that's what Pete's program is about. And I won't get into too much of that. I'll let him talk about it. But he talks about bringing the greatness out of your HVAC business, which this can apply to any type of service business.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Let's get started with the show.
Are you looking for valuable business advice to reach that 7-figure revenue mark? Do you want actionable tips to properly navigate through every business challenge you encounter along the way? Let Tersh Blissett and Josh Crouch be your guide in getting you to the top here at Service Business Mastery. Tune in as they sit down with world-renowned authors in business, leadership, and personal growth who share valuable insights about management, marketing, pricing, human resources, and so much more. Let their nuggets of wisdom gold guide you in owning a thriving, profitable, and ever-growing business. Here are your hosts, Tersh and Josh.
Welcome, Pete.
Hey, Josh. How you doing? Hey, Tersh.
Hey, man.
Hey,
great. Doesn't that music just kind of want to make you?
I know,
right?
Right?
Makes you want to move a little bit.
No, it was awesome. It was awesome. No, I appreciate the opportunity. You guys, I'm a big fan. Been watching both you guys on and off as I can, but
Right.
what a nice impact you guys are having on our market. We really appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's our pleasure. We love the connection aspect of it. Really, introducing people to, like, just meeting guys like you on the show, and Cassie, who we interviewed this morning, and just being able to connect her and you and other guests together with either contractors or other guests on the show, which is it really is awesome. That's what our main focus is, really helping to ask the unasked questions, answer those unasked questions that contractors may have, or even technicians and managers who may be considering starting their own business. And so that's our mission, is to be that connector. And so we especially thank people like you that come in as an expert and are willing to answer some of these ridiculous questions that I have. So with that being said, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you do what you do now.
So yeah, I appreciate that. And I appreciate what you're doing too. I've been in heating and air conditioning since 1982. So that shows how old I am. Coming up on 40 years.
Dang.
Makes me feel old. I know, right?
Was air conditioning, was it even invented back then? I mean,
I was
air conditioning.
Well, I was born in 83, so
85 years. So sorry, Pete, you're gonna feel a little old.
So yeah, I was back when Willis, what's his name? Willis Carrier invented AC.
You guys are neighbors, right?
Yeah. So no, actually, it was the recruiter that got me. U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. They sent me to Fort Belvoir, Virginia, to study heating and air conditioning, refrigeration. And so that's
cool.
The old saying, it's a great place to start, was certainly true in my case. But yeah, I left the military, went into the civilian aspect of it, was hired as a junior service technician. I was really young, and just continued to, put in the hours and worked for a few companies, worked on refrigeration, worked on some chillers, worked on a little bit of boilers, but ultimately decided I had to do this for myself. And I started my company back in 1989.
Okay.
1989. And went through all the struggles, made every mistake you can possibly make. But during my 10 years before I sold it, I went from just, out there struggling like everybody else to, we had a nice team. We had a good culture. We had about 14 total employees. We had a really good area of the market. We were right up against Charlotte in that area.
Okay.
And like I said, we got a lot right, but we learned our lessons the honest way too, and got our bumps and bruises along the way.
So can I ask you a question real fast about your transition from Army into the civilian world?
Yes.
So, and it's going to be different, for every person, but how was that transition, even though you were doing, refrigeration and whatnot in the Army, coming to the civilian side of things and getting into commercial refrigeration? How was that transition there? I mean, because Josh and I both, prior service, your prior service, you go from hero to zero, and that's a whole concept in itself. And then you're getting out of government, quote unquote, refrigeration and air conditioning, and moving into the civilian world, which is done a little bit different.
Yeah, that's the first time anybody's asked me that, and that's a great question. I think accountability and I think the ability to measure yourself was part of the biggest transition for me, because I remember going from a scenario where the discipline was so strong. We had checklists, we had procedures, and there was just a certain way of doing things, into a world where I can remember standing so that my boss couldn't see my shoes because they weren't clean, and because we always had them to a high buff, serious. And, going out to customers and just really just being thrown out there without a process, just go figure it out.
No SOPs.
No SOPs.
I had a guy come in, and we hired him straight from the Navy. And actually, everybody that's on board with us right now, that's in the field anyways, our prior service, they weren't air conditioning, but this one was. He was Navy. He worked on submarine. He was a refrigeration guy there. And he came on board with us, and all he had known was Navy for 15 years, I think, or something like that. And he was like, "Where's your SOP for this? Where's your manual for this?" I'm like,
Where's your
"Man,
book?
you haven't I haven't been asked that in so long." I was like, "It's all digitized, like everything we have here." He's like, "Yeah, but I need the steps on this." I was like, "Oh, we are not the Navy. We are not the government. Like, I'm not going to give you every single step on how to charge a refrigerator or charge a unit." But I was like, "Wow, I completely forgot how that process, like how strict everything was and very regimented."
Yeah, it was definitely a culture shock. And it's funny how quickly that becomes ingrained in a part of who you are. But it was a move for the best. I mean, you know, I was a civilian at heart, so it was nice to get back out there, you know, in the real world.
So then you had your business, you started your own business in 1989, and then you exited there and you went to work for the manufacturer, right? Linux?
I did. I sold my business. I went through a divorce, and that was my primary reason for exiting out. And you know, I go back to my old market and I look at the companies I used to kick their butts, and they are massive now. And so a part of me looks back on that
like, oh man,
with mixed emotions, right?
Yeah.
But I did. I said, you know, I've done this. I did notice that my favorite part of being a business owner was Tuesday morning training, when I would have all my techs in there and we would go through all our process training and stuff like that. I really enjoyed that. And so the transition over to Linux worked because they made me a territory manager, and I got to utilize my skill set by working with business owners like yourself. And it was like a consultative sales process, you know, and they looked forward to Pete visiting, and it was really nice. It was a good transition.
So you weren't that pressure sale, that pressure TM. You were
no.
You were the guy that came with actual knowledge of running a business and how to do it successfully, which that's a whole nother segment where we could get on sidetracked there.
As well as unsuccessfully, because you know we have that aspect too. But yeah, you're right. A lot of times, people would it was just so well received, and it was really nice. And I was in my learning element as well. I was doing a lot of training. I had the audio books going. I had the 1/3 of the state of North Carolina, so I had the entire East Coast. Wow. So from the Outer Banks, you know, Kitty Hawk up that way, Nags Head, all the way down to Calabash, you know, past Wilmington. So it was a beautiful territory. A lot of driving time, a lot of audio training and things like this, and a lot of opportunity to learn and get better on that side of the business in terms of interacting with people and gaining their trust. And it's generally like we do still to this day. It was through service, through giving, you know, through helping others.
Yeah. So then you started the coaching aspect of things, and I'd like to dive into the X factor and how you came up with this and kind of lay it out there for us. Like, what is the X factor? I know we have four pillars here that we're going to cover on today's show. But let's kind of dive into that a little bit.
So yeah, the first concept was greatness. Okay, so I'm a great service technician. I really do good work. But yet when I walk into the customer's home and I tell them all the logical reasons why I'm superior and why my services are worth more, they nod their head. They tend to agree with me, but ultimately they revert back to, yeah, but you know, the other company is cheaper than you are, and it's the same stuff. And so I couldn't break free from being lumped into that group. And so I thought, well, how can my greatness bleed through? What can I do to set myself apart? And oh gosh, the CEO of Nuts, or I'm sorry, Southwest Airlines, he wrote a book called Nuts, and he called it 1%ers. And he was asked essentially, you know, how is it that Southwest Airlines, your service is so much better than everybody else's? And he said, it's not. It's 1% better, but it's 1% better at every customer touch point. And so I started to try to internalize that type of a philosophy in our business practices, and it really made a difference. It really made a huge impact. So coming full circle, now I had to go through my bumps and bruises as well, because being a business coach for heating and air conditioning contractors, it usually attracts the young, struggling guys that really need help. And I can't turn them away. And so I've got to have a price point that works well for them and all that good stuff. But what they were missing ultimately was something deeper than what I had to share. You know, I was talking about this earlier on the show. I'm talking to 14 different contractors and I'm trying to be everything to everybody. And ultimately, I don't know that I did as good a job as I could have, because once we got focused on the X factor, that what is that thing about, not just about your company, but about you, that really makes, you know, when you're the technician at first and you're the one that goes out there and you get your first hire, let's say you hire Josh and you send Josh out there and they say, you know, Tersh, you know, Josh is a good guy and everything else, but do you mind taking care of my equipment going forward? We really like you. What is the difference?
That is such a real comment, because you can see in the reviews, like even in Google reviews, when they're saying the owner of the company, like when that's the technician that goes out there and that's the salesperson and whatever that goes out in site, it's a different review that's left, and it's you can tell that it's like, okay, that person was probably the owner that was out there. Yeah, it'd be a long message.
It's like a couple paragraphs about how awesome and they did this thing and that thing, and it's not like, yeah.
As soon as I got out of the field, like a couple of summers ago, I hopped back in the van and did a summer as I was hiring more people, because we had an influx of calls and I didn't want to turn people away. So I jumped in the van for the summer. And as we were hiring people and onboarding and everything, we got new clients, commercial clients over that time period. And we slowly they've kind of teetered away. Not a lot of them, but a couple of them have kind of like stepped to the side and said, hey, look, it's nothing about you. Your company's great and everything, but it's not you. We're looking for one guy in a truck, because that person gives a different service than a company that has 7 technicians. And I was like, dang, like I wish I had known this, 6 months ago. We could have this conversation, and that's on me for that not happening. But they really just valued me versus like the whole company. And I know we dropped the ball on some things, but it's crazy how different the relationships were between that.
So yeah, to that point, that the problem is, okay, Tersh comes in and he's got his own personal values, among them maybe family, professionalism, honesty, integrity, caring about his customers, all these different things. You tend to press the emotional responses to people who share the values.
That's a good point.
In which you overlap, right? And so they're responding to you, not necessarily because of who you are, but the way you make them feel. And so when somebody else comes in and they don't share those same values, that same commitment, the attention to detail, the preoccupation of, is everything good? Do we cover everything well, thoroughly, and things of this nature? And so they don't feel that same feeling from the service experience. And so ultimately it boils down to the problem with when you build it around you, it can be that you can't scale you.
Very true.
You can't clone off and be Tersh. So what we have to do is take that part of you, externalize it into processes. And here's the key point: attract employees who share those values.
Yeah. And that's the amazing thing there, because that point that you make there is really so accurate, because the clientele that we had when I was there and then since left were the ones that we attached, because we tried to do consistency of care, like continuity of care. So the similar technician goes every single time as often as possible. And the technician that was assigned to those 2 clients that I think that come to mind, no longer with us. He didn't match our core values. He just the integrity wasn't there, and so what you say there, it's true. I mean, it happened with us. The technician didn't share our same values.
Yeah, and so this is why we see so many people hiring based on personality as opposed to experience. You get this new technician who's got 10 years experience, and he's coming in burning all the bridges that you worked so hard to build to begin
That's
with.
exactly what happened.
Yeah. And so so what it boils down to is if you find the right teammate, if you will, and you share those values and you analyze and understand the key characteristics that come naturally for that person in a given role, you'll know if they're a good fit for that job or not. And if they are, and you share values and you have a similar, cultural personality, you've developed a culture in essence. And it gets stronger and stronger. And when you hire people like that, they don't leave. They don't go for somewhere else for a couple of dollars on the hour. Yeah.
Yep. So is that as far as, because obviously people are like, well, how do I figure out what is my X factor, my personal X factor that is going to be, the business is really going to be built on, I know you have some steps. Do you want to discuss how you figure that out about yourself?
We talked about the 4 pillars, and I'll touch on that in just a second, but ultimately it starts with doing the work. You got to go inside. I do this little thing called branding from the inside out. And we go through and we assess your values, and we look, to Tersh's point, to Google reviews, and we look for emotional responses in those reviews that are emotionally charged. And so Tersh was great, and he was very reasonable in his price. Well, that value is money. That's not the one we're really looking for. But Josh was fantastic. He took the time and explained everything really well so that we understood what we were getting. So now we have a value of somebody that knows how to communicate, right? And so we start to define, okay, what is it about me that people are drawn towards, and what part of me can I accentuate and elevate and put out to the world in a way to draw more of that type of customer. So I'm kind of reversing engineering how to fish for a certain kind of fish.
Yeah.
If I'm attracting a bunch of price hunting, bargain hunting type customers, I may want to change my approach to how I market myself, because I'm appealing to a certain part of somebody that I really don't want to. And so yeah, it starts with branding from the inside out. So what is your why? Why did you do this, right? What is your story? How did you come to this point? And we've heard the story. And so when you start to look at your values, your story, and your why, you can come into an identity that blends with what your passion with the business is and create what we call, have you read the book Blue Ocean Strategy by any chance?
Yep.
Yeah. So for those of you who haven't, there's a theory there that everybody seems to be over in that red ocean, fishing in those bloodied waters of heavy competition. But if you can learn to take and lift yourself out of those waters and over into these fresh blue waters where you don't have all that competition, you can be much more successful. Right. And so what the X factor is we're dialing in on this genuine, authentic version of yourself, and we're building a business on that, because in this way you'll never get caught being something that you're not, because you built it on something genuine. And so in the blue ocean, for example, we talked about the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. So my story might go like this. When I was in the Army, we had SOPs, everything was done a certain way. And I go out into the civilian world, and they just throw me out there. There's
beer can cold, right?
Right. Yeah. Beer can cold. There's, that's good airflow and all these different things. And I realized, this isn't right. And the customer didn't get what they were paying for. Callbacks were high. And so when I formed my company, and this is just me riffing here.
Yeah.
I said, that's part of who I am. I was an engineer in the Army. So I come up with this identity called the comfort engineer. And the comfort engineer, it's my power identity, by the way. I am different than everybody else. And so I set myself apart, not just with a different identity as a comfort engineer. I also have what I call level 5 service, which in my story, I might utilize, that transition from the military with very detailed checklist and process, and how I have that over into my company now. And so that may be that part of it. So if I have this powerful identity that's drawing the right kind of people, and I do this work that's superior, and I have a way of communicating this, you're getting much more out of me. Suddenly the perceived value goes up, as long as the customer interprets that greatness, or the quality and everything that you're doing bleeds through. And so that leads into the third pillar. Pillar number 1 is power identity.
Mm-hmm.
Pillar number 2 is your unique service or unique approach to service. And number 3 is what we call Insta Rapport customer experience. And so rapport is one of the 7 emotional triggers that everybody, is what Josh said at the very beginning, responds to automatically. People buy for emotional reasons, and they justify them logically. That's the way we work. And your customers are no different. And if you learn to press those emotions, you get a lot more yeses. And we round that out with the 4th pillar, which is emotional marketing. So we're marketing not to the logic, we're marketing to those emotions. And of course, the big 2 are friendship, that's rapport. People do business with people they like. So when you're going through that customer experience, if you have a process that builds rapport, you're much more likely to get a customer that's going to do business with you. And if you blend that with the 2nd emotional trigger, and by the way, these come from a book called The 7 Triggers to Yes. And I can't remember the author's name right now. Really good book. But the 2nd one is authority, right? And so if you are the authority and you have rapport, and you do this right, you transition the dynamic of this confrontational, where you're on one side and they're on the other, you're the customer and I'm maybe a salesperson, into sliding the chair beside them, shoulder to shoulder, and we address this problem as a team.
Yeah, you're working with them.
Said.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and so those are the 4 pillars. But yeah, arriving to that, creating that identity, and then you have to capture, a really good artist to go out there and this is, I think this is where a lot of heating and air conditioning companies just get it wrong. We think we can do a brand. We can't. We think, our company name is so cool because it's cool to us in a private way, or our slogan is so great. The slogan needs to mean something. So let's take my example, the comfort engineer. So what can be my key message that might say, okay, I'm different than everybody else. And so how does this sound? Why settle for just another HVAC contractor when you can have your own personal comfort advisor? The comfort engineers, a different kind of comfort company, right? So that may need to be kind of dummy down on the wording a little bit.
Oh, right.
Capture a visual representation of this person, but he has those shared values. Mr. Artist, make that comfort engineer look honest, because my core values are honesty, integrity, caring, and professionalism. Make him look professional, make him look honest, and make him look like he cares. Mm-hmm. And you can capture that kind of stuff visually. Put that on your wrap, put that on your website, and put that out, when you're working with people like Josh and things like this, so that the message that you're putting out, it triggers the emotional responses, not the $99 special.
Right.
Yeah. Not competing on price.
Right.
Yeah. I love that. That is really good.
That's the overall concept of that transition. It really is a transition. Now, unfortunately, we're all who we are. I talk to guys all the time and say, I want to be like Victor over there in California. I forget Victor's last name.
Rancor.
He's crushing it, right? Yeah. So he's crushing it out there. And, I tell these guys, you can't be somebody you're not.
That's right.
You got to be the best version of you.
Yes.
Not the best version of someone else.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so your success is directly correlated with how you perceive yourself and what you believe is possible for yourself. And so this creates a lot of limiting beliefs about ourselves. I don't know if I can sell. They might think I'm selling if I say this, or I don't know if I'm good enough to compete with that big company. So that limitation is very real. But the beauty is, it's temporary. It's a fluid. It's not written in stone. You can rewire those circuits in your head into something that serves you better.
Absolutely. And I deal with that with technicians having the imposter syndrome, because I come in and, well, from the first time, like when our CSR when they call in, the CSR just touts the service expert, and they're an expert in our industry and all this. The dispatcher does it, the pre-report call, and then they get out there, like all of our notifications are, your expert is on the way to you to service your home. And then they get there and they're like, I have imposter syndrome. Like, I'm not an expert. Like, I've only been doing this, a handful of years. Like, I'm not the smartest guy that has ever done air conditioning. And so I'm like, dude, you cannot go in there doubting yourself. Like, let's just go in here. And like, I did a job on a ride along a couple weeks ago, and the technician was like, man, you just handled that so smoothly. And I was like, that is the first time I've ever done what we just did in my entire life. Like, I've never done this before. And he was like, I would have sworn you've done this forever. Like, you've always done. I was like, just go in there with confidence and just handle it. Like, just do it. And he's like, all right, cool. And watching him transition has been great. We've been doing 2 ride-alongs a week for about 6 weeks now. And it's been really eye-opening for me, and helping the technicians just really come out of their skin. And it's like, okay, very, very cool to see exactly what you're talking about. The guys that I didn't know how to vocalize it, and now I kind of understand, like, I can share it with the team, but very much that's exactly how it happened with us.
So that type of thing. Okay, so you're the business owner, and so you had to make that transformation from employee mindset, where your accountability was exterior, over into self-employment, which now I don't have any boss. If I don't want to work today, I'm just going to lay around.
Yep.
To the business owner, entrepreneur, somebody who has a vision, who is responsible. So this requires different disciplines and different mindsets and different beliefs. And it all starts with your core beliefs. And so a ritual, it starts with goals, obviously, but affirmations, gratitude exercises, things of this nature. This is where the rewiring becomes reinforced. And so as a business owner, and this is the X factor, by the way, it's a huge part of it. Huge, not just the pillars. You got to get there. You got to go through the transformation. You got to get past, I'm not good enough, imposter syndrome, the grass is greener on the other side, to, it's based on, I'm not good enough, or something's wrong with me, to what you are good at, doubling down on that and going for it. Now, that said, you've got to work on your weaknesses. But if you reframe the way that you're looking at the scenario, a lot of times that's all it really takes. Instead of being a salesman, be a consultant. That's the consultative service call process that I mentioned earlier that we do, that takes all the pressure off the technicians. I hate to sell, but my numbers look better than the sales guy. Why? Because, I'm not going to not go through this process without doing my job. My job is to go over all these things with you, so that you understand exactly what the status, the assessment is of your system, right? And so that has to happen, not just at the owner level, but as the cultural leader, you have to provide that for your team.
So how would you give the team that? Like, because a lot of times they don't know that that's what they need. And sometimes they're going to put up a wall, like, hey, look, I don't want this right here. Like, it just sounds like some voodoo stuff to me. Like, it does.
And you do have to make it real. Stephen Covey called it the paradigm shift. And I'm sure you've read that one.
Yeah.
That one's pretty popular. And so it becomes that, like I was saying, when you're looking at things one way and you look at them the other. One day I had a service meeting. It was on a Tuesday. And I'd asked Stacy, he was my technician. I said, how did that service call go on Friday with the blower motor over at that church? And Stacy said, well, it didn't go too good. He said, the customer said the price was too high, and I don't blame him. It was too high. So you can see right there, he does not believe in our pricing. Well, we were at that time, we were the very first to introduce flat rate pricing in our market. Not only was it new to our customers, it was new to our employees. I had just finished Ruth King's financial training over at Lennox, and I went over to the grease board, so everything's fresh in my mind, right? So I'm going through, and we break down everything, tit for tat, and we translate it over to the by the hour. I total everything up, and it come to 100, if I remember this right, $119 per hour back then. I said, this is what it costs us. And I said, that book is based on 120.
Yeah. So,
and the same technician said, we need to go up. And I said, no, wait, we've got markup on parts. That's not factored in there, but you can see our pricing is very fair. Guys, their eyes popped up. The change in their behavior was evident because of the change in their beliefs. And that's where it has to start as a leader, is we have to understand what beliefs need to be in place to provide the consistent action that I need for this particular role.
Yeah, that's great, man. That's good stuff.
That's really good stuff.
We could be talking for hours about this stuff. I mean, obviously, I've shared my experiences and what we've dealt with within our business, and it's very real, everything that you're mentioning here, Pete. And we appreciate you coming on the show. Where can people reach out to learn more about you and everything that you have going on?
I appreciate that, Tersh. HVAC Greatness. HVAC Greatness at gmail.com is good. Gmail.
Okay.
Right.
Perfect. Yeah, man. Well, I appreciate that. Josh, you have anything you want to say while we close out? So I'll cut you off.
No,
here.
but Pete's he's just a down to earth guy, and that's what I love about doing this podcast stuff, is we're able to bring people that I think deserve to be heard by more people, but sometimes there's just not, the avenues just aren't there for them to be heard by different audiences and stuff. And being able to bring them in front of, a lot of people and see that they're genuine, they actually care about your success, not just they want to get paid more, I think is a really rewarding thing. And I know I've been following, actually, when I was still on the contractor side, I had followed Pete and took some advice from some of his stuff from when you were doing the videos, the video trainings, and some of those other things back in the day. So I've been following him longer than he probably even realizes, but it comes full circle now that I get to do it on this end and help him out. But Pete's very down to earth. And I think if you're looking, if you can't figure out what that is, I think Pete's a really good resource for you to figure out how to find that X factor for your business and not just be another chuck in a truck, if you will.
Yeah. Thank you, Josh. That means a lot coming from you, bro. It really does.
Cool. If anybody has any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to myself, Josh, Pete. We'll put all our information in the show notes. But with that being said, I hope you have a wonderful and safe week. And thank you again for watching this episode of Service Business Mastery Podcast. We'll see you.
See ya.
See you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Service Business Mastery. Now that you are equipped with essential business advice from this impactful conversation, you are one step closer to becoming the successful owner of your dreams. If this episode has been helpful to your business journey, don't forget to subscribe to the show, leave a rating, and share it with other owners as well. Visit servicebusinessmastery.com to learn more.